I think that for those that have not become a small business owner, had not started a business, they underestimate how amazingly difficult it is to be a small business owner, whether it's a franchise or not a franchise. It is really, really hard to start a business. It's really, really hard to make that business profitable, to replace your income that you had in corporate America, and then at the far end of the spectrum to actually generate wealth for your family. So it's really, really hard.
You're listening to Home Care Hindsight, the podcast where we talk with home care leaders about the big mistakes they've made and the even bigger lessons they've learned along the way. I'm David Knack, head of sales here at Zingage, and I've built a career on the idea that we learn a whole lot more from our mistakes than from our successes, which is great because I've made a lot of mistakes. I've gotten to know some of the leaders in this industry who've built amazing businesses and are super well respected. So I thought it'd be fun, instead of asking them about the great things they've accomplished, to have them tell the story of one of the biggest mistakes that they've made and how that mistake changed their thinking and the way they run their business. All right, we are back with another episode of Home Care Hindsight, brought to you by Zingage. I'm joined today by Chuck Bailey, founder of True North. Chuck, welcome to the show.
David, good to see you again. Hope you're doing well today.
I am doing great. I'm fresh off of vacation. I need another vacation, but that's okay. Chuck, for people who are not familiar with you, how would you introduce yourself?
David, I am Chuck Bailey. I am founder and CEO of True North Holdings. True North Holdings has multiple brands ranging from bookkeeping to medical billing, revenue cycle management. And most recently, we've expanded into recruiting services, and we also have a marketing company as well. Those would be the businesses that pertain to most of your listeners. However, we also have 3 or 4 other brands in other segments of the industry, one of which I'm actually a franchisee.
What are, as you've gotten more and more into the home care world, what are the kinds of challenges or the ways that you've been working with clients that are most exciting to you and to your team?
Well, first of all, as a matter of background, I've been in the home care business 19 years. I was a corporate guy in industrial manufacturing and, burnout in the corporate world. And 19 years ago, I went out and bought my first home care franchise location as the 9th franchisee in what is now, one of the largest franchise systems in the country. I think there's things that have changed in 19 years as being not only a franchisee, but I moved to the franchisor side of things. And now for the last 13 years on the vendor side of things, there's so many things that have changed over the years, but there's one thing that remains constant. And that is the leader of that business, whether it be the franchisee or a non-franchised home care owner, they're the best salesperson in the room. Whether or not their job is sales or not, as the leader of that business, in 19 years, it's still all about sales.
A friend of mine, friend of the show, Bob Roth, he came on and he said, I tell my team all the time, I need fewer clients who are FOB. And I was going back to like freight agreements I've looked at and I thought, FOB, that sounds like something. And I was like, FOB? And he goes, yeah, friends of Bob.
Yeah.
And to your point, like he's grown a pretty significant agency and still he's the best salesperson that his team has. And it's important. You're in other worlds of franchising. What have you learned in other franchise verticals that pertains to the home care world?
So the biggest thing that I've learned, and this goes back to, there's many things that have changed in home care over the years. There's many things that have changed in franchising. The one constant, though, is the role of the leader, the franchise owner or a non-franchise model, the role of that business owner. And that really is, what is the job of that owner? And if you ask that question to, many franchise owners, they're going to tell you, wow, I'm head of clinical or, I'm sales or ops or whatever. But the constant that's out there, whether it be in home care or non-home care, the franchisee's responsibility, their job by definition is to do 2 things. 1, drive revenue, and 2, build the team. Everything else in the business can be either delegated or outsourced to a partner. But driving revenue and building the team are those 2 things that I've seen working with thousands of franchise owners that are consistent no matter what industry you're in and no matter what market whether you're a large territory, a small territory, a big city, a small city, you can rule out all of those things. And those owners that are great at driving revenue and great at building their team will always be more successful.
Very good. Well, Chuck, I brought you on here. Obviously, you've got a great background for our listeners to learn from. Been on the franchisee, the franchisor side. Now you've built a business that has a bunch of different brands that serve franchisees in home care, outside of home care. But we're not here to talk about any of that. Instead, I bring people on this show who are really successful to ask them about the big mistake that they've made in their career and how that mistake changed the way that they think about life and their business. And so, anyways, what's your big mistake?
I'm now in 40th year in business. I've had the opportunity to work with some of the most well-known companies in the world as an executive. And then I switched from, having the corporate jet on call to going out and doing intakes and working shifts when caregivers, didn't show up when I owned my first franchise. And I think the biggest mistake that I had when I first got into the home care business, and really in small businesses general, is thinking I had to do it all. I wanted to conserve cash. I wanted to not be frivolous with the capital that I've invested in the business, and I held on to things too long. And that really, really limited my growth in the early days. I'm a little bit of a type A, or for those disc profile fans, I'm a high D. So I want to control a lot of things. And I wanted to build this perfect organization as a small business owner that was modeled after all the mistakes that I'd made in my career and all the things that I think I maybe did well. And the impact of that was I tended to let perfect get in the way of good enough. And then I also tended to wait too long to outsource those things that I didn't need to control myself. And I see this time and time again, David, with many, many owners, is they want to hold on tight, they want to control, and it really does limit their growth.
You sharing, all of that makes me think of the type of business owner that I come across frequently as someone whose background is in corporate America. And often I hear them say corporate, like it's a 4-letter word. And it's clear you've processed some of that trauma to the extent that you're not, still just angry at corporate. But I think your backstory of, okay, I was in corporate America, I was, in a pretty successful, high-powered role there, got burnt out on that, went into franchising. But I think one of the through lines that I see through that frequently also is, but I had to control everything. And so, I want to go back to before you got into the home care franchise world. Can you tell a little bit about your story of what took you from corporate America into home care? And then from there, have you done some Monday morning quarterbacking on part of that journey and why that resulted in high D, control freak kind of tendencies that limited the growth of your business? It's a long spaghetti noodle of a question.
It is a long spaghetti noodle of a question, but there's some threads in there that actually resonate really well for me. I spent the first 25 years of my career in corporate America, had the opportunity to work with great companies, as I said before. One of the things I learned in that is the larger the organization gets, the more bureaucratic it gets. And bureaucratic is not necessarily a bad word. It just means there's extra layers of control and there's guardrails that need to be put in place to keep the machine rolling. There's too much at stake. It's too big to fail. Well, as I grew in those organizations, I've had an entrepreneurial mindset throughout my life. My family is, kind of small town, USA, blue collar, entrepreneurial type activities. So that DNA thread was there. And the faster I wanted to go in corporate America, the more I had to follow guardrails and board meetings and all that. So the move into franchising, the move into home care was an opportunity to go do it the way I wanted to do it and play by my own rules. However, going back to our earlier point, the big learning point and the big mistake that I see many, many people make, just like I did, is rather than try to control everything, have an extremely clear vision of what it is that you want to accomplish. Put guardrails in place that have enough width to allow people to make decisions, and then give them the tools to go do their job. I've made tons of hiring, mistakes. I've hired people that would want to, they were great at following my rules. The reality is they needed to be great at being creative inside the guardrails that were set. And over time, the opportunity for the leader is to make those guardrails just a little bit wider and allow the company to be a little bit more creative.
So, when you think about, okay, this is where I started my home care franchising entrepreneurial kind of career, what was the moment or the kind of breakthrough that you had that enabled you to get past this I have to control everything myself tendency and, give you the ability to do that second thing that the owner can do, which is to build the team?
I think the biggest thing is coming from corporate America, there's a tendency to maybe overcomplicate things. Franchising, more specifically, the home care industry, it's the hardest I've ever worked in my life. It's 7 days a week, it's 24 hours a day. You're dealing with families' lives. You're dealing with their mom, and that is relentless and passionate. It requires a different mindset. And I think that the realization for me was that this reminder that people buy from people, more specifically, people buy from people that care. I've recently become a fan of Simon Sinek, and Simon, talks about the why we do this. And I think that my realization, especially over the last few years, even, is really understanding the why we do this, hiring people that can understand the vision of what it is you want to do with your business, explain the why, and let them go do their jobs. And here's the big thing. They're going to make a ton of mistakes. They're going to do things in a way that I wouldn't have done them. And I've learned to not become frustrated by that, because it's not that their way was better or worse than my way, but their way was different. But as long as it was against this foundation of what it is we're trying to accomplish, and the guardrails are in place, and that they understand the why, they will get it right far more often than I will. And they will do it in a time frame that's faster than if I try to control all the moving parts. These are the mistakes that business owners make. I mean, it's taken me 60 years to figure it out.
Yeah. Yeah. One of the things that I think stands out there is like, and I think, a lot of our listeners who came from kind of this corporate background with a lot of structure and bureaucracy and felt frustrated by that and moved into entrepreneurial kind of ventures. One of the things that stands out is how important, the primacy of mission, culture within building this team. I think you said, like, you don't need people who are going to come in and follow the procedures and processes that you've set up. You need people who are going to come in and buy into the vision for the business and figure out how to embody that. And I think the rub there is you have a defined way that you would execute that vision. Every other person is going to do it a little bit differently. And so I think, like, some of the challenge of being a leader in a small business, being a leader in home care, is being able to hold in tension the vision and this kind of like maniacal focus on what the business is going to be and mean to the community and whatnot, but also holding the execution of that loosely enough that when people come in the business who are aligned to the vision and the mission, but execute a little bit differently, that you don't freak out.
Yeah. Well, I think that for those that have not become a small business owner, had not started a business, they underestimate how amazingly difficult it is to be a small business owner, whether it's a franchise or not a franchise. It is really, really hard to start a business. It's really, really hard to make that business profitable, to replace your income that you had in corporate America. And then it's at the far end of the spectrum to actually generate wealth for your family. So it's really, really hard. And when I look at these kind of mission-driven startups and founders out there, hey, it's not unicorns and rainbows in small business here. And when I talk about, the passion and the vision and the why we're in this business, all those things are really important, but let's not mistake those for unicorns and rainbows, because the work itself is really, really hard. And I think the underpinning of leadership is that passion, is that mission, is that why you're in the business that you're in and why we do what we for our customers. But that's not a replacement for, I have to make really hard decisions. I have to have a clear strategy on what I'm going to do. I have to communicate that strategy well, and then I have to put KPIs in place to make sure that we're actually delivering on our promises. Promises not only to our customers, but promises to our shareholders, which is normally, our spouse, our brother-in-law, or maybe an outside investor. And it's not unicorns and rainbows, David.
No, it's hard work. And then, a big part of what you guys do is bookkeeping services. And you shared, some kind of, let's call it like being really fiscally conservative early in your entrepreneurial journey. What have you seen owners do as it relates to their thinking about cash flow and cash reserves and, kind of all the financial underpinnings? Because again, you can have all the unicorns and rainbows you want, but if you don't have money in your bank account and you're stressed about making payroll, you're probably not going to make good decisions as a business owner.
So this one is really interesting because I preface it by saying a broad brushstroke comment that startup business owners, franchisees, home care owners, they all have unique talents. Some may be real good at sales, some may be real good at clinical, some may be real good at accounting and finance. And what I've learned personally and what I've seen with the hundreds or thousands of owners I work with is just because they're great at something or it's a core competency doesn't mean that they should be doing it. I say this here that we work with many franchise owners that are CPAs, financial analysts, former corporate, PwC people. Sometimes they're the worst franchisees because they want to overanalyze everything. The business is not that complicated. They want to overanalyze it. They spend their time doing the math. But if I go back to the kind of fiscal conservative here, I see franchise owners falling into three categories. One is when they're running below break even, they know what their bank account looks like, they're burning cash, they don't want to do financial reviews. And we've done thousands of financial reviews. I've personally done thousands of financial reviews. They don't want to do a financial review because they want to hide from the truth. The other end of the spectrum is those franchisees that are performing well. They are making $350,000 a year, 14% EBITDA. They don't want to participate in financial reviews either because they're good. Their bank account's good. They're good. Both of these folks are leaving money on the table. They are not thinking about their next move. And I really struggle with that. Then you have the ones in the middle that really have a cadence. Just like every week they have to run payroll, every week these franchise owners think about a cadence. And one of the biggest mistakes I see franchisees making is falling into those different ends of the spectrum. But my argument is regardless of where you're at financially, just like you run payroll every week, just like you get up every morning, hopefully just like some of us go to the gym or go walking in the morning, you develop that habit of a financial cadence. And that financial cadence remains the same whether you're in startup mode burning cash or whether you're extremely profitable, because it sets you up to make the decisions to not only grow your business, but perhaps protect you from an oncoming storm that you may not have seen. And so in the end, our bookkeeping business, let's be real, bookkeeping is a commodity. Anybody can do it. But where the value gets created, and we preach this, David, is developing a financial cadence. And maybe more than anything, we end up being your trainer at the gym, making you get up every morning and work out. We force you to follow that cadence. And those home care franchise owners that follow a cadence in general are 10% higher in sales and 30% more profitable overall. It's crazy. I mean, it's just amazing what a cadence can do with an otherwise commoditized part of your business.
Makes a ton of sense. Okay, we're going to transition to a part of the show next where I ask you about something that is overrated in the industry. People think it's, everything. You don't think it's actually that great. What's that?
Marketing services are one of the areas that is the biggest question mark for me. The home care industry is still about people buying from people. The biggest challenge is getting those people that need to buy from you to know who you are. And the industry today is selling a lot of exotic solutions to those marketing challenges out there. But as I go to home care conferences, franchise conferences throughout the country, I see a revolving door of marketing companies. What is constant is companies and tools that help engage caregivers, companies and tools that help home care agencies hire more efficiently, drive retention. Those are the things that are the constants here. The revolving door of exotic marketing solutions is extremely frustrating for me. That doesn't mean that marketing is not important to your business. I think it's finding solutions that are right for your industry. And I say this maybe a little bit jaded because I own a marketing. Latitude 40 Digital is the fastest growing division of our company. It's a marketing agency primarily providing services to franchise systems. And so we've had to really rethink what it is that we're actually offering and focus on what matters. And so marketing, I think, is overrated. I believe that the right type of marketing is absolutely essential to building relationships with the families that home care franchisees service.
Mm. So what are the kinds of things that you see as we're always chasing shiny things in this industry, and what are the kinds of things that you see people make a decision to pursue and ultimately 3 or 6 months down the road realize that, oh, that was a lot of wasted effort and activity that didn't really yield results?
Yeah. I hope to avoid it in this talk today, but it's the natural lead in to AI. It's a shiny object right now. I made a post a couple weeks ago that went viral a little bit talking about the headline was 80% of all AI is total crap. And I think it is. And I'm old enough to remember very well the dot-com boom in 1988, 99, 2000, 2001, where 80% of really all the internet dot-coms that launched were total crap. But the 20% changed our lives forever. AI is the same way. I have spent months training AI agents to help our bookkeeping franchise customers analyze financials and help them make better decisions. I have looked at AI agents to help with recruiting. It's the foundation for one of our other companies. And we have looked at AI marketing tools to help franchise owners communicate more effectively with their families and perhaps more importantly with their caregivers, because the bigger they grow, the more the message starts to dilute. Remember, we talked earlier about the why, the Simon Sinek, why are we in business here? It's very easy to dilute that. AI tools used properly have the opportunity to make sure that not only, like we said earlier, operationally, your business has guardrails, but your message has guardrails. It is easy to run down a bunch of messaging rabbit holes and confuse your team, your caregivers, and your customers. What's important to me? So I think AI in home care, set aside the scheduling tools that are coming out, the engagement tools, the recruiting tools. One of the biggest opportunities, shiny object aside, is to make sure our message remains consistent.
Yeah. And that strikes me as the kind of task, I think about what are the tasks that AI is good at today versus the ones that it's not good at. And analyzing for consistency of message is something that, you can provide some of the kind of inputs and guardrails and here's how we've talked about ourselves in the past. Here's what I want to write. Make any recommendations for consistency, identify any inconsistencies so that we're continuing to communicate the same kind of identity and mission that we have previously.
Yeah. So David, let me give you a great example here. And this is way outside the lane here. We're in the restaurant business. We have a restaurant. One of the things that I heard from our customers was that depending on when you called and who you talked to, your first time experience with the restaurant was totally different. What's on the menu? What's the vibe like? What's the entertainment going on? If the restaurant was busy, the answers were real quick and not detailed. They didn't care. So when I think about a home care agency, if I call in to a home care agency today, that experience is going to be very different depending on whether whoever answers the phone is in the middle of a scheduling crisis for a caregiver didn't show, or they're working on payroll, or whatever that is. And I hear constantly, you can't use AI receptionists in the home care. It's too impersonal. So I'm torn. I agree with that 100%. It's an extremely, extremely personal business. Family calling in for the first time is admitting that they can't take care of their mom themselves. And they're making a phone call. The phone rings. Somebody answers, thank you for calling, whatever. I'm in the middle of payroll. Hold on a second. I'll get back to you. And that's not the way it goes down. We know that, but that's from the customer's perspective, what they're feeling. My argument is Let's take a step back. Let's slow that process down. And then let's figure out what our message is, build a high quality AI to do that first answer of the phone, slow the pace down and make sure we get some information and then get that to the person that can, a real person that will now treat that with the respect that that caller needs. This is our challenge right now to go build that. Because I think in other industries, like our restaurant business, customers are being trained to accept the AI and realize that it will give them more information. And let's not pretend it's a real person, it's a tool. All right. Let's don't go the way of VRUs from 20 years ago. Let's not do that.
One of the challenges that we have to confront if we want to implement AI voice agents as a, kind of first step that's helpful is confronting the expectation people have, which is that the AI voice is not going to be helpful. How many times have you called into a service provider and the job of that AI is to deflect as many phone calls as possible and have people just get frustrated and hang up? And so I find myself saying, agent, 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 please get me a person over and over again until it finally, gives up on me and transfers me to a human being. And so I think one of the challenges that we have, it's kind of an uphill battle, is how do we build trust when people call and hear that it is a robot? I've heard the term clanker thrown around as something that is kind of like a derogatory term for AI. How do we build trust that this is going to be helpful and that we built this in because it's actually a better experience and a more consistent experience? And I think that's going to come with time, but that's a challenge for us in the short term.
Well, I mean, it goes back to what I said before, that 80% of all AI is crap. It's not that 80% of the companies or the tools are bad. It's that most of the ads that people see for these types of tools are shiny object type ads. It's going to solve all your problems. The reality is, much like I spent 6 months training Lex AI, which is my personal AI assistant that we're rolling out across our company internally. Lex knows everything that we do, how we do it, why we do it, and it knows the tone or the why that we do things, so that when I call on Lex to help me answer a question or help me draft an email or put a business plan together, it's doing it in my voice, in my why. And if a business owner is considering these types of tools, whether it be an employee engagement tool, whether it be a bookkeeping service, whether it be a virtual receptionist, they better be willing to do the work, because they're just not going to buy it off the shelf and plug it in.
Makes sense. Okay, I want to transition to, we talked about a big mistake that you've made, but what's a little mistake that you see home care owners make all the time? And if they quit, it'd make their lives or their businesses like 10 times better.
This goes kind of way back to the beginning of our conversation. Many franchise, small business owners, home care agency owners are not great at sales. We've talked about that. It wasn't their core competency. They didn't come out of that industry. And in financial review calls all the time, I hear them talk about, I've just hired a salesperson. I'm so excited about the salesperson I've hired, and we're getting them going here. Well, what happens is that they then outsource sales to their salesperson. And the reality is, as we talked earlier, there's two main things that a home care owner is responsible for. Their main job is drive revenue and build the team. And a new salesperson checks both of those boxes. I may not have salesperson, on my business card, right? But I have owner on my card, and that's the most powerful card in the business. And the buck stops with me. So I can't delegate sales. Secondly, I can't delegate the development and the monitoring of that salesperson. And I have seen this time and time and time again. And as we know, the turnover rate for salespeople, especially first-time hires for home care agency owners, is like 60%. In the first year, 60% of the new salespeople will turn over. Was it a bad hire? Or is it the owner maybe not doing their two main jobs? And so we have this talk all the time. What does it take for this is a math question, right? Let's switch to math, David. So one of the tools that we talk about in financial reviews all the time is, what are the goals for a salesperson? How do I measure them? And to me, there's only one goal. When you hire a brand new salesperson, there's only one number that matters, is what do they have to sell to get them to break even? And it's a real simple answer. It is, what is the fully loaded cost of that person? Let's assume it $60,000. And we know that the gross margin of our business is maybe around 40%. Let's keep the math simple. So fully loaded costs might be 60,000 divided by your gross margin. And the answer is $150,000. So if I hire a new salesperson, they have to sell $150,000 to pay for themselves. After that, they start making money. Before that, they cost me money. So there's only one number that matters. And let's keep the math simple, is 150,000 divided by 52. I have to sell $2,800 per week to cover the costs. So as a salesperson, my goal is real simple. Sell $2,800. That's all I want you to do. And once you do that, you get to break even on that salesperson. Everybody's thinking my salesperson can sell $300, $400, $500, $600,000 in annual sales. I would argue none of that matters. Figure out what break even is and focus on that.
That is super tactical. I also appreciate the ASMR for our listeners of the calculator in the background. That's how you know you're in the bookkeeping business. Honest is the calculator is handy and it's got the real buttons. So
I mean, the same thing goes for really any hire. I mean, a conversation with franchise owners all the time, home care agency owners, is how do I know when to bring on that next scheduler? How do I know when to bring on that next recruiter? And my argument, do the math. All right. Do the math. If that next person costs you $50,000, and we'll bang around in the background a little bit, $50,000 divided by your gross margin is 0.4, is 125,000 divided by 12, it's 10,000 a month. So if that person will help me grow my business $10,000 per month, or will help the salesperson support $10,000 a month in new business, they just paid for themselves. Do the math. Don't overcomplicate it. It's not spreadsheets in 3 decimal places. It's what is the investment you want to make divided by the gross margin will give you the answer of how much you have to sell. Everybody overcomplicates that. It's a simple thing that you do on a napkin. In fact, David, is that my team, here at True North Holdings, they want to go buy a new laptop or want to, put a new marketing campaign in place. And I say, do the math. And I say, what's the math tell you? I got to sell $150,000. Can you sell 150 with this? Yes. Great. Go do it. Now it's on them to go sell it.
Well, we've talked about a lot of mistakes and stuff that went badly, but I want to hear about something that's happened lately in your business that you're proud of.
I am really excited about my franchise bookkeeper. True North has been around 13 years in the bookkeeping business, and we launched my franchise bookkeeper officially in January of this year, 2025. And we built a sales team around it. We built a marketing team around it and an operations team to support it, to really do it the right way. And just seeing the power of hiring the right people and thinking about people first, rather than what's the software we're going to use. We have a whole development team down the hall in our nerd lab, right? They're building all kind of cool tools. But the reality is making sure that we hire the brightest people possible first, and then teach them the vision of what it is we're going to do. Because, in my career, I never really understood this until actually I was looking in the rearview mirror. And I've worked in multiple industries. But what I've seen in each of those industries, whether it was, industrial manufacturing, banging together pieces of metal, or software companies, there's 2 things that remain, consistent. One is bright people learn faster and make better decisions. And they also understand the vision more quickly and stick to that mission. All right. And so hiring bright people first is a huge win for me. And it was just a subtle reminder of, we don't have to hire somebody from the industry. While it's helpful, we don't have to hire somebody from the industry. Let's hire bright people that are eager to learn.
That's very good. Okay, before we get out of here, what do you want to plug?
We did a little bit of math on the calculator here. We talked a lot about it. And, we have 7 divisions within True North Holdings. Bookkeeping is the constant here that every home care franchise owner needs. They can choose 3 options. One, they can do it themselves, which I think most franchise owners undervalue their time. If they're not valuing their time at $100 an hour, when they do their bookkeeping, they're undervaluing their time. Secondly, they can hire the lady down the street or their friend or their brother or their CPA and sub-optimize what it is they're actually getting, or they can work with an industry expert, like my franchise bookkeeper. And it's actually way more affordable than what most people think when you really look at the value for the time that as a franchise owner you're spending. And so my franchise bookkeeper is growing very, very rapidly, working with hundreds of home care franchises across the country. And I would want to believe that maybe we're one of the smart people that franchise owner hires that understands their mission and vision, helps them grow their business, David.
Yeah, that sounds great. Well, Chuck, thank you so much for coming on the show today. Really enjoyed it.
Love it, David. Thanks for having us. Good luck to you, and thanks to all your listeners.
On behalf of the team here at Zingage, thanks for listening to the show. We'll be back next week with another episode, so be sure to subscribe wherever you listen to podcasts on Spotify or Apple or YouTube. Leave us a rating while you're there. It helps other people find the show. If you have comments on the show, drop me a line, david@zingage.com. Would love to hear from you, chat with you there.